Welcome to our channel. Here, we uncover the hidden stories behind power, crime, and money that history never fully explained. Today's topic is one of the greatest financial mysteries of the American underworld. A question that has puzzled historians, investigators, and crime researchers for decades. Did the FBI ever find Al Capone's fortune? When Al Capone was finally taken down, the man who controlled Chicago's criminal empire was removed from the streets, but his money seemed to disappear into thin air. Millions of dollars earned through bootlegging, gambling, and organized crime were never clearly recovered. So where did it all go? Let's begin. The fortune built in the shadows. At the height of his power in the late 1920s, Al Capone was one of the richest criminals in the world. His empire was not based on small-time crime. It was a massive, well-organized business operation disguised as chaos. Capone's primary source of income came from illegal alcohol during Prohibition. Speakeasies, breweries, smuggling routes, and protection rackets generated an estimated $60 to $100 million per year, which would be hundreds of millions today. But Capone understood one critical rule of survival in the criminal world. Money must never leave a paper trail. He avoided banks. He avoided formal ownership. He avoided signed documents. Cash was king. Instead of keeping money in one place, Capone used a fragmented system. Trusted lieutenants held cash. Businesses operated under other names. Money moved constantly. Assets were hidden behind shell operations. Hotels, restaurants, laundries, gambling houses, many appeared legitimate but quietly funneled profits into Capone's network. This system made Capone powerful, but it also made his fortune nearly invisible. When law enforcement agencies, including federal investigators, began hunting him, they quickly realized something disturbing. They knew Capone was rich. They just couldn't find the money. No bank accounts, no registered properties, no clear financial records. From the FBI's perspective, it was like chasing a ghost made of cash. As pressure increased, Capone became even more careful. Large sums were allegedly hidden in private safes, stored with loyal associates, buried in secret locations, moved offshore through criminal intermediaries. By the time federal authorities closed in, the fortune was already scattered beyond easy reach. And then came the arrest. When Capone was finally convicted, not for murder or violence, but for tax evasion, the government expected to seize a massive treasure. Instead, they found almost nothing. No mountains of cash, no secret vaults, no clear trail. This led to a haunting question that still remains unanswered. Did the FBI ever truly find Al Capone's fortune, or was it lost forever? What the FBI actually found, and what slipped away. When Al Capone was finally convicted in 1931 and sent to prison, many believed this would be the moment when the government uncovered the hidden wealth of America's most powerful crime boss. The public expected vaults bursting with cash, secret accounts, and undeniable proof of his criminal fortune. But the reality shocked everyone. When federal agents moved in, the FBI and Treasury investigators found far less than expected. They seized a limited amount of cash, some jewelry and personal items, a few vehicles and valuables, minor assets connected to known associates. There was no massive fortune recovered, no evidence of the tens of millions Capone was believed to have earned. For investigators, this raised a troubling conclusion. Capone's real wealth had already vanished long before the arrest. The FBI quickly realized they were dealing with a criminal who had planned his financial survival years in advance. Capone had deliberately structured his empire so that nothing important could be legally traced back to him. Most of his money was believed to be held in cash by trusted family members, controlled by top lieutenants under false identities, reinvested into businesses that looked legitimate on the surface, moved through illegal international channels. One major obstacle for the FBI was timing. Capone was arrested after his financial system had already matured. By then, the paper trail was gone. Witnesses were afraid to talk. Records had been destroyed, and many of the people who knew the truth were either dead, imprisoned, or loyal enough to stay silent. Federal agents also faced a legal limitation. Even when they suspected assets existed, they could not seize what they could not legally prove belonged to Capone. Ownership was the key problem. Properties were not in his name. Businesses were not in his name. Money was not in his name. From a legal standpoint, Capone appeared almost broke. Behind closed doors, investigators admitted something uncomfortable. Capone had outsmarted the system financially. While he lost his freedom, his fortune remained largely untouched. Some agents believed portions of his wealth were quietly absorbed by surviving members of the Chicago outfit. Others suspected Capone's family protected the money, releasing it slowly over time to avoid attention. There were even rumors that corrupt officials helped bury or redirect parts of the fortune, though no solid proof was ever produced. By the time Capone was transferred to Alcatraz, the FBI's focus shifted away from recovering his money and toward dismantling the remaining criminal network. The fortune, once so visible in the form of power and fear, had become invisible. And this invisibility created one of the most persistent myths in American crime history. The theories, the myths, and the money that never reappeared. After the FBI failed to recover Al Capone's fortune, the mystery only grew deeper. Silence from witnesses, missing records, and Capone's refusal to talk created a perfect breeding ground for theories. Over time, these theories turned into legends. And yet, none of them were ever proven. One of the most popular beliefs was that Capone buried large amounts of cash. People imagined steel drums filled with money hidden beneath farms, warehouses, or abandoned properties around Chicago and Indiana. Former associates hinted at secret drop locations, but none ever provided exact coordinates. Several searches were conducted over the decades, but nothing significant was found. The FBI treated these claims cautiously. They knew Capone preferred efficiency, not romance. Burying millions in cash was risky, impractical, and difficult to access. Investigators believed this theory was more myth than reality. Another theory suggested that Capone moved his fortune offshore. During Prohibition, international smuggling routes already existed between the United States, Canada, Cuba, and parts of Europe. Capone had the connections to move money through these channels. Cash could be converted into gold, gems, or foreign assets beyond U.S. jurisdiction. However, during the 1920s and early 1930s, offshore banking was far less developed than it is today. Large transfers left traces. The FBI found no reliable evidence linking Capone to foreign accounts or overseas holdings. A more believable theory involved trusted lieutenants and family members. Capone was known to rely on a tight inner circle. Key figures controlled money, businesses, and logistics while keeping Capone legally distant. When he went to prison, these men continued operating parts of the Chicago outfit. It is likely that portions of Capone's wealth were quietly absorbed into the organization. Instead of one massive treasure, the fortune was broken into smaller pieces, spread across people who knew how to stay invisible. This would explain why no single cache was ever discovered. Some historians believe Capone's money was slowly spent rather than hidden. Legal fees were enormous. Bribes had to be paid. Families of imprisoned associates needed support. Maintaining loyalty cost money. By the time Capone reached Alcatraz, his health was failing, and his influence was shrinking. The fortune may not have vanished overnight, it may have simply been drained quietly over time. There was also the uncomfortable possibility that the FBI arrived too late. Capone's empire peaked years before his conviction. By the time the government acted, the money had already changed hands, been reinvested, or disappeared into everyday commerce. In the end, investigators were forced to admit something rare in law enforcement history. They did not lose the money. They lost the trail. No hidden vault was ever found. No offshore account was ever confirmed. No final confession was ever given. Al Capone took the truth of his fortune with him. And that silence remains one of the most successful financial disappearances ever executed by a criminal. The end of the trail. What happened after Capone fell? By the time Al Capone reached the final stage of his life, the question of his missing fortune had become more important than the man himself. Capone was no longer the untouchable king of Chicago. Prison, illness, and isolation had reduced him to a shadow of his former power. And yet, even in his weakest years, the money still did not surface. After serving time in Alcatraz, Capone was transferred to other facilities due to his rapidly declining health. Neurosyphilis had damaged his memory, judgment, and speech. Doctors later described him as having the mental capacity of a child. For the FBI, this was a critical moment. If Capone ever planned to reveal anything, this was the time. But he never did. Interrogations produced nothing useful. Capone rambled, contradicted himself, or said nothing at all. Whether this was deliberate or the result of illness remains unknown. What is clear is this: no last-minute confession ever came. After his release, Capone returned to his estate in Florida. The government monitored him closely, hoping he might reconnect with former associates or reveal financial trails. Nothing happened. No secret visitors. No suspicious transactions, no sudden wealth appearing in his name. He lived quietly, surrounded by family, far removed from the criminal empire he once commanded. Meanwhile, the Chicago outfit continued without him. New leaders emerged, operations adapted, money kept moving, but none of it could be directly linked to Capone's personal fortune. This led many investigators to a sobering conclusion. Capone's wealth was never stored in one place. It was never meant to be found. Unlike modern criminals who rely on accounts, records, and digital trails, Capone operated in a world of cash, trust, and silence. He understood one thing better than anyone else of his era. Money is safest when it does not exist on paper. By distributing assets through people rather than places, Capone created a system that survived even his downfall. When he fell, there was nothing concrete for the government to seize. In death, the mystery only deepened. When Capone died in 1947, his estate was modest. There were no hidden vaults, no surprise discoveries. Journalists, historians, and treasure hunters continued searching for decades. Every few years, a rumor would surface. A wall would be broken. A property would be excavated. Each time, nothing. The FBI eventually closed the case, not because it was solved, but because it could not be solved. Capone's fortune became something more powerful than money. It became a legend, a reminder that the most effective crime is not the one that escapes arrest, but the one that leaves no evidence behind. The final answer: did Al Capone's fortune truly disappear? When Al Capone died in January 1947, the world expected one last revelation. It never came. No hidden vault was uncovered. No secret bank account was exposed. No buried treasure was suddenly claimed. Instead, investigators, historians, and financial experts were left with the same unanswered question that had haunted the FBI for years. Where did the money go? The most widely accepted conclusion today is unsettling in its simplicity. Al Capone's fortune did not disappear, it dissolved. Capone never treated money as something to own personally. He treated it as something to circulate. Cash flowed constantly, through lieutenants, through shell businesses, through bribes, through silent partners, through family members who never appeared on any record. By the time federal pressure closed in, there was no central fortune left to seize. Every dollar had already been absorbed into the system. Some funds were reinvested into legitimate businesses that continued operating long after Capone's arrest. Others were lost during the Great Depression. Large sums vanished into bribes paid to politicians, police, and officials whose names were never written down. And some money simply vanished with the men who carried it. Capone trusted people more than places. When those people died, disappeared, or betrayed one another, the money went with them. This explains why even modern forensic accounting has failed. There is nothing to trace. No records, no accounts, no paperwork, only stories. One persistent theory suggests that portions of Capone's wealth quietly entered the modern economy through descendants, business partners, and organized crime networks that still exist today. Not as Capone money, just as money, cleaned by time, disconnected from its origin. If this is true, then Capone's fortune did survive, not as treasure, but as influence. Another theory is even darker. That Capone, fearing betrayal, ordered large sums destroyed, lost, or abandoned rather than risk exposure. To a man like Capone, losing money was preferable to losing control. In the end, the FBI never found Al Capone's fortune because it was never meant to be found. His final crime was not violence or bootlegging. It was designing a financial empire that left no fingerprints behind. That may be why, decades later, Al Capone remains more than a gangster. He remains a warning. Power fades, empires collapse, but money that leaves no trace can outlive them all. And somewhere between myth and reality, Al Capone's fortune still exists, not in a vault, not underground, but hidden in the system he helped create. The case remains closed. The mystery does not.